Okay, well, good morning. My name's Dawn Huntrod. I'm one of the regional membership managers who work across the UK supporting our manufacturing community, and I'm delighted to welcome you here this morning to this very topical event, which is led by Dan Hume from Inspired Energy. Inspired Energy are a Make UK partner organisation, and Dan heads up that relationship to support all of our members with their energy, carbon and net zero challenges. Some basic house rules at the moment is I'm going to ask you to remain on mute unless you're invited to speak. And can I also, I know I've been asking you, but can I also remind you that it would be great to see your name and your company name and even yourself, as it's good to, it makes these things much more nicer if we can see who we're talking to. We're going to ask you to have your mobile phone ready as we're going to do some anonymous voting through a session called Mentimeter, and Dan will explain a little bit more about that as we go on. Also, you might want to have a scrap of paper ready so that you can jot down some notes, because I believe that Dan is going to have a couple of challenges towards the end of this session. So it's over to you, Dan. I'll let you take over from here and look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thanks, Dawn. I'll just make sure I'm sharing my screen properly before we kick things off. Hopefully everyone can see that. Dawn, can you let me know if you can see that on screen?
You can see it.
Brilliant, thanks. Because I've now lost pictures of everyone's head, if anyone has a question during this session, there is a proper Q&A at the end, but please do feel free to drop a message in the chat if it's topical at the time that I'm waffling on, and I'll be happy to try and answer any questions. Otherwise, we have got a proper Q&A at the end. Thought I'd start by setting the scene with the agenda. So my intention today is to give everyone a bit of an overview of Energy Buying 101, as I say. So what component parts make up your energy bill and how you can influence your overall total cost. A bit of a market update, which I'm sure everyone wants to hear, why the markets have been so crazy recently and what to expect in the future. You may have seen in the news as well that a couple of energy suppliers have actually come unstuck as a result of the recent market price increases. Then want to give you a bit of guidance about how you can potentially mitigate any future increases and protect yourself from
Germany.
Market volatility. Sorry, can you just mute out whoever that is? Cheers. And then we've got a couple of interactive sessions later on. One which is try your hand at being an energy trader. So we've got a bit of an energy trading game. And then another one is to, as an attempt to try and understand what your impact or the cost impact of the market increase could be on your next renewal. Now, I appreciate we've got a number of varying different businesses on the call today from different energy spends and sizes and scales. Everyone will have their own personalized set of, I guess, procurement initiatives and ways of renewing or ways of buying energy. So I appreciate the, I guess, a caveat in advance of the interactive session later where you try and understand the cost impact. It's not going to be a perfect world fix for everyone, but we do offer that as a bespoke report if anyone's interested at the end. We've obviously got a Q&A session at the end. So, oh, sorry, I've double clicked there. First poll, just to test your technology skills, is going to be held on a website called Mentimeter. So it's a bit like a live interaction, a bit like a game show result, I guess. And the idea behind this is that if you quickly go on your phone, type in www.menti.com, right at the top, you should have a box to click in your access code. The access code is there on screen. Once everyone's logged into that, I'll flick over to that and we can see the results as I ask the questions. I'm going to do a quick snapshot poll at the start just to try and get I guess a sense for the people in the room. It is anonymous, so don't worry, you're not necessarily going to be telling me exactly what your energy spend and renewals are, but it's just a gauge for me to understand the audience so that I can try and tailor what I'm discussing today to the people sat in the room and listening. So hopefully everyone's on www.menti.com on their phone or tablet or additional device. And the code at the top is 74382599. I'm just going to flick straight over to that. Come on, technology, don't let me down. And we've got, there we go, we've got 8 people vote so far.
Sorry, Dan, what was the code?
74382599. The code was 74382599. I'll give it a couple more minutes. So we've got 9 voters there. Well, there's a last minute flurry now. Okay, so as everyone can probably appreciate, my job's just got a lot harder because there's a very mixed audience in the room today. So if for I guess all events and purposes, if I dumb it down too much for the people who are a bit more technical, I apologise. And for anyone a little less technical, I apologise if I go into too much jargon or too far down any rabbit holes. So please do make a little note of anything that you don't understand and make sure you quiz me on it in the Q&A at the end. But thanks for that. Just one more quick poll, just to get a sense check and a feel for who's got an impending renewal and actually who's a bit more prepared and who's further out. Again, same code 74382599. This should help you populate this quiz or this poll. Hopefully everyone can see that one and the options are available for them. Is anyone having problems with this one? I knew technology had let me down.
Yeah, I can't see it actually done.
I can't see it either.
Right, bugger. That didn't work then, did it?
I can't either.
Okay, I do apologise there. We're trialling it as new technology to try and get a bit more in-session engagement. So apologies for that. Hopefully no one's in this blue box that's got a contract that's expired. Hopefully all of you were voting 12 months plus because the market's pretty crazy at the moment, as you'll see a little later on in my presentation. The other question I was going to ask is who buys flexibly, who buys fixed at the moment, but I'm guessing you won't be able to see that on the poll thing either. So maybe we'll come back to that. But if anyone, as I said, doesn't understand the terminology and the jargon that I'm talking today, please just drop a quick chat in the chat box, and I'll try and explain where I can. Back to the slides, hopefully. Just keep that Mentimeter open. We will be using it a little later on, all being well. Right, into the nitty gritty then. I wanted to start with a bit of a common misconception about energy buying. From speaking to a lot of, I guess, Make UK members, but also just energy users in general, a lot of people seem to have this misconception that if you buy more energy, you get it at a cheaper price. When actually the fact is that you couldn't be further from the truth. It is a wrong misconception. Energy is a commodity. It's not necessarily influenced on the volume that you buy. A lot of it is all down to approach and timing or route to market. And just as an example, because Inspired as a business manage more energy volume than Empower, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get you a cheaper price than Empower would give, or than any other operator for that matter. So I guess it's just to set the scene that a big company like Sheffield Forge Masters or another real energy intensive business, they're not necessarily going to get a cheaper energy price just because they buy more energy. Starting to go down the rabbit hole now, so I'll try and explain it as carefully as I can. But when you're buying energy, there's different blocks of granularity that you can buy, and these will depend on your approach to market and ultimately your renewal date. If we start on the right hand side, that's the easiest to talk about. You buy in seasonal blocks. So there's a winter period, which, believe it or not, winter starts on the 1st of October and apparently it ends the 31st of March. And obviously summer then is the 1st of April to the end of September. So typically, if you buy a 12-month contract, you'll be buying a block of winter and a block of summer, starting and ending typically around those renewal dates. If you've got an October and April renewal date, that's probably why you've got those your contracts aligned to those renewal dates. If actually you've got a contract renewal midway through a period, then it gets a little more complex when you're pricing your contracts, because you're having to blend maybe 2.5 periods together to try and get that overall coverage for that contract. Likewise for fixed or flexible purchasing there. Typically, we would always recommend that you align to a period end, and most, portfolios for public sector and larger customers on flexible contracts will have a contract end date at the end of September or the end of March, purposely to align with these seasons, so you're buying a full block of energy. If you want to get a bit more granular, then you can break those seasons into quarters, or the year into quarters. So you can buy different quarters depending on where you are in the year. That then gets a bit more complex where purchasing is concerned, and a lot of this, if you're on a typical fixed price contract, you wouldn't see all of this back working behind the scenes, so to speak. But this is essentially what your supplier or potentially your consultant is looking at when they're procuring energy on your behalf. Go a step further and you can then break it into blocks of months. So you can buy energy in monthly blocks based on today's value in the market. And then if you go one step further, you can buy it the day ahead, the month ahead, the balance of the week, or actually within day. You can make a multiple number of trades within day. On the right hand side, as you can imagine, it's a bit like a ripple in a pond. So if you throw a stone in a pond, the spot market's the bit that's going to have the biggest impact, that the ripple's going to be greatest, closest to where the stone's gone in. The stone in this case is a political piece of news, a weather driver of the market, a supply and demand driver. So the closest to the point that thing has happened, or to the point of energy being delivered, the biggest that impact could have, whether it's an up or down movement. As you then go through the granular blocks from months to quarters to seasons, typically that ripple will flatten out. So when you're buying energy, if you're buying seasonally, typically you will see less volatility than if you're buying on a spot market basis, where you're buying within day or the day before you need it, which gets quite granular. But again, depending on which contract you have, that will determine the blocks of energy that you're procuring. A lot of that will also depend on the level of risk that your business is willing to take, or likewise the level of budget certainty you need. As you can appreciate, if you're buying energy the day before you use it, you're not going to get a vast amount of budget certainty. Whereas if you're buying further out and you're buying winters and summers ahead, you're going to get a lot more certainty with your pricing, because you're buying 6 months at a time. Because of those certainty, or you get a cost of convenience, I guess, or a risk premium. So the further away from the point that you're purchasing you procure. So if I bought energy today for winter in 2024, for example, typically there would be a bigger risk premium in that cost than if I was buying it for this winter. Likewise, if you're buying spot market, you've got a lot less risk premium built into the price, because it's a lot clearer as to what could happen in the market and how that price could be driven. But likewise, you've got a hell of a lot more volatility, certainly at the minute, which I'll come on to. So breaking down your bill, appreciate in the last couple of months, these percentages are probably a bit skew-if, but let's say any other time other than the last 6 months, these numbers should be reasonably stable. So on the left-hand side here, once I've populated the screen, we'll have the electricity bill. Commodity. Oh, I've got an echo there. Commodity is typically 35 to 40% of your overall delivered energy bill. So that's the wholesale component cost, the actual electricity or gas. You've then got a typically 25% of your bill to pay in delivery charges. So the transportation and distribution costs that are added to your bill to maintain the grid, to balance the system, and to make sure that energy gets through the cables to your meter. The government then slap on a lovely big chunk of tax in the form of a number of different taxes and levy schemes. Appreciating the audience is manufacturing, so a number of you might get some exemptions or relief from some of these taxes and levies in the form of a CCL discount or a mineral metallurgical, or even the energy intensive industry scheme. If none of you know what those are or you want to know more, just chuck a quick question in the chat. And then typically, believe it or not, for every 100-gram bill, as an argument, 5% of it is your supplier's margin, and a bit of metering. That's for electricity. Gas is a slightly different picture, albeit based on the government's newly announced net zero strategy that came out a couple of days ago. Within the 400 pages of please vote for us waffle, there's actually quite a lot of information suggesting that they're going to be moving this chunk of taxes here from electricity bills over onto gas to try and disincentivize people using gas in the next decade as well. They're forecasting that to happen. Reason for showing you this, other than to give you an understanding of how your bill's made up, is typically when you go to market on a fixed price contract and you say, to 6 or 7 different energy suppliers, today I want a price from you for my next 12, 24, 36 month contract. All of those suppliers are buying it from the same place at the same price. They're all going to the same wholesale market, whether it's us as Inspired or another consultant, or it's Eon, British Gas, Total, SSE, whoever it is, they all buy it from the same market. And as I said before, it doesn't matter whether they buy more or less, they all get the commodity at the same price. They've then all got to send that energy through the same grid and infrastructure, so the distribution transmission charges are the same for every single supplier in the UK. The taxes and levies are governed by government, so again, Eon can't get a better deal than British Gas can, for argument's sake. So in reality, the only bit that you're able to negotiate if you align suppliers on a day and fix a contract is the supplier margin, which is less than 5% nowadays because it's a very, very competitive marketplace. So of a 100-gram bill, you might be able to negotiate about 3 grand's worth of margin. And if you're in a fixed price contract and renewing that, other than different views of risk of the suppliers when they bid for your business, i.e., do we think you're creditworthy? Are you going to pay us on time? The only difference you should typically see in cost is about 3% spread in those prices. I accept that might be different in reality when you are tendering, because, as I said, some suppliers might see your business as higher risk and therefore put a bit more risk premium in. Some suppliers may just have a different appetite for winning new business and therefore they don't feel they have to be as competitive. But theory says that should be a roughly a 3 to 5% swing in price when you're tendering. And therefore, unfortunately, you're missing out on potentially some value within the rest of your bill when you're negotiating in that way. I'll come on to some alternatives a little later, but just wanted to set the scene there. So, market review. Wanted to give you a bit of an update on what's happened in the market. Hopefully everyone's followed me so far, and now we're going to go a bit further down the rabbit hole. So trying to put the backstory behind what the market is, the wholesale market is an aggregation of buyers and sellers, a bit like energy eBay. And the way that the market is constructed is, 6 now energy brokers. And I don't mean energy brokers as in inspired, I mean these screens here. And these are members of the London Energy Buyers Association, which is LEBA for short. These are the approved people that can display prices on any given day for any of those periods or seasons that I showed earlier. And what we do internally is just aggregate all that information onto one screen. If we zoomed in on this screen, you would see different prices from each broker. Now, what's important to say here is if you've got full access of all of those screens, that means you're getting a truest picture of what the market is offering. And you probably can't see it on this screen because it's zoomed out a little, but there's a lot of breakdown here. Those are all of the different within day, week, month, quarter, and then seasons. And across the right hand chart, it's all of the different broker screens prices and the bid offer spreads. Now, typically there's a 5 to 10% in some cases swing between some of these broker screens. So if you've got full access, it's essentially like going to a supermarket and saying, right, this can of beans, I can see the price for Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Morrison's, Aldi, Lidl. If you've only got a couple, you can't necessarily get a true picture of the value that's being offered in the market at that time. That information then spits onto lovely or quite ugly charts like we've got on screen today. So we've got a chart for electricity and then one for gas. I appreciate a lot of the talk might be around electricity just because typically that delivered rate is higher. But I appreciate there's a number of people on the call that use a considerable amount of gas as well. So forgive me if I waffle too much about electricity. What we've got on screen is the rolling 12-month average base load cost of electricity. So on the left-hand side of the chart, the axis is pounds per megawatt, and this is how energy is procured on the wholesale market. All you have to do to convert that to kilowatt, pence per kilowatt, is move that decimal place over 1. So £30 per megawatt becomes 3p per kilowatt. So over the last, what have we got there, 14, 15 years, we can see there's been an area of volatility around 2008. Any of you that were buying energy back then probably got stung, or ideally you were lucky and you bought it 2007, protected yourself from that period of volatility around 2008. Then for a long period between 2009 and 2016, the volatility was only probably £20 a megawatt, 2 pence per kilowatt. So that's going to impact your bill by what, maybe 10% swing, excuse me. Not COVID, don't worry. Yeah, so we saw previous market lows of around £36 a megawatt for electricity, 3.6 pence per kilowatt. Then at the end of 2018, 2019 winter period, at the point that the UK's gas storage facility got decommissioned, or the largest UK gas storage facility got decommissioned, and we had beast from the east, that really cold, horrible winter. All of the, I guess, supply and demand fundamentals aligned, and we had a really bad time where we had no available gas. We were fully reliant on Europe sending their gas over through interconnectors and pipelines. They were obviously in the same weather system that we were in, so they were under extreme supply and demand, supply without the available demand, and that pushed the prices up to horrendous levels, or what we thought at the time was horrendous levels. Then we see here COVID, so the drop in demand around the pandemic last year got down to, from what I can remember, £32 a megawatt, so 3.2 pence per kilowatt for your wholesale power. So ideally, everyone on the call was frantically buying then, and hopefully your sites weren't shut down, and you were really proactive and took advantage of, you know, that 15-year market low and fixed out. However, I expect the reality for some of you may be a little different, and actually you may be now up for renewal at what is a 15-year market high. It obviously stabilized a little bit since a couple of weeks ago, but we did reach prices of £178, £180 a megawatt for your future 12-month contract. Now, bear in mind at the start of the presentation, I said the further out you buy, the less volatile typically the price is. So if you were buying day ahead, you know, a couple of weeks ago, for argument's sake, we've seen prices at 300, 400 pound a megawatt within day. So 30 pence a kilowatt before you add on all of your non-commodities, your transportation, distribution, your taxes and levies. And actually, as a knock-on result of this, I know there's a couple, well, there's certainly a fertilizer manufacturer in the northeast that was all over the news saying they actually stopped production during that period because they couldn't afford to run, because the gas cost was so high and so significant that had a massive impact on their delivered material, their finished goods. Quickly switch to gas. Follows a very similar trend if I switch between the two screens. Gas and power are very closely linked in the UK, partly because we are a net importer of utilities. So whilst we have our own generation assets for electricity in the UK, gas, unfortunately, coal-powered fire stations. We have renewable technology that's available to generate electricity when the wind's blowing or the sun's shining. However, that gas, because we lost our UK storage, or the majority of our UK gas storage, under tight supply and demand fundamentals, when we need gas to heat and to power industry, that drives the price up for using gas to then generate electricity. And that's typically because a lot of our gas comes from Europe. And if we're having bad weather, or we're seeing similar supply and demand fundamentals that they are, then, you know, they're in the same boat. They're less likely to start offering that gas out to us. The other alternative to gas through pipelines in the UK is liquefied natural gas. So this goes on the back of tankers. Typically comes, you know, well, it goes all around the world, and you can literally track boats in the sea as to where they're going to dock. And a boat could be halfway here, an LNG tanker could be halfway here. Someone outbids what we're prepared to pay for that tanker, and that tanker will literally turn around in the sea and go to the highest bidder. Now, in the last few months, well, last 6 months or so, we've seen that Asia have been gobbling up liquefied natural gas, partly because they're trying to remove coal from their heating and their power generation, and from their industry as a part of their net zero journey. Gas is slightly better than coal, so they've been gobbling up that liquefied natural gas as opposed to using coal. But yeah, market picture is very similar. So I guess the one thing to point out is that gas is traded in pence per therm. So the numbers are slightly different. From memory, to convert this to pence per kilowatt, I think you've got to divide it by 23.001. So 60 would become about 3 pence per kilowatt, roughly. We've seen prices of 165, 170 for the next 12-month seasonal contracts in the last couple of weeks. So trebled, quadrupled what we've seen before. It's back down now to about 100 pence a therm. So rubbish maths here, but about 5 pence a kilowatt for anyone renewing now for the next 12 months. Which is pretty horrendous, because I would imagine most people are getting billed, or have been billed, at least in the last 12, 18 months, at about 2 pence a kilowatt, if you negotiated well. But yeah, the market has taken a similar flow, or similar picture to the electricity market, as I said, that they're directly linked earlier. Putting that volatility into some numbers, just to try and explain, I guess in the last 5 years, the market has been vastly more volatile than it has been in the previous 5 years. So on screen are some prices. First of all is electricity. For the first 5 years, the average price was 4.957 pence per kilowatt. The maximum in that 5-year period was 6p. The lowest was 3.6. So a spread of 23%. Since 2016, we've seen highs of 177, so 17, nearly 18 pence a kilowatt before you add on all of your non-commodities, and a minimum of 3.2 pence a kilowatt. The average isn't too dissimilar from the previous 5 years, but that volatility has been far more significant, to a spread of 145%. Gas again follows a similar picture. So previous 5 years, maximum of 72, minimum of 32, spread in price was 39%. The average was around 2p, at 2 to 3p per kilowatt delivered rate. The last 5 years, the average rate's actually been lower by a fair whack, but as you can see again, the volatility and the spread has been far more significant. So what does this mean? Well, since 2016, timing to go to market has been far more significant than it was in the previous 5 years. If for whatever reason you're unfortunate and you're renewing around this maximum time in the market, or you've got exposed hedges and you need to hedge, then you're getting caught out. Whereas on the flip side, if you're proactive, I'm not going to say lucky, but if you're able to read all of the signs in the market really well, then you've probably protected yourself at a very low price, which is well below the average for the period, and therefore secured some significant savings, certainly for that period. Main key takeaway here is that final bullet point is your procurement strategy allowing you to protect yourself from risk, but also taking advantage of when the market's really low. So just continuing on the market update, I wanted to provide you some information as to what the short-term risks are and what the potential opportunities are around electricity and gas procurement. So gas storage, I've referred to it a couple of times already, but for 2021, European gas storage levels are well below 2019 and 2020 levels. They're about 2/3 of where they were for those previous 2 years. The risk here is continuity of supply. So if Europe have a cold winter, as storage is low, there could be potential supply issues that could drive prices up. So bear in mind, these are just short-term drivers. You may have seen in the news as well about Nordstrom 2, a Russian gas pipe or gas pipeline. Russia contributes to around 1/3 of European gas supply. In the next few months, Russian supply has been diminishing through their normal pipelines, and this is adding a lot of nervousness and anxiety to traders of gas, and therefore they've been adding risk premiums to the price. Russia are expecting a colder winter this year, and so are trying to look after themselves, keep their own house in order, and make sure they've got enough supply to meet that demand, and therefore they're not pushing as much as they could through that pipeline. Nord Stream 2 is a gas pipeline that runs between Russia and Germany. It's newly constructed, and we were expecting it to be signed off and commissioned for use, but there's been some delays there. So this will add, I guess, a considerable amount of supply into Europe once it's working, but it's not flowing at the moment due to a number of reasons, partly political, and the German regulator at the moment is currently not allowing flows into the country. There's been some asset outages. So in the UK, we've got diverse fuel types for electricity generation. Around 20% of this comes from nuclear, or our base load generation. It's a reliable generator of electricity in terms of knowing how much it's going to be generating from each reaction when they're operating correctly. However, there's been some unplanned outages with nuclear generation assets in the UK. There was also a fire at an interconnector. So this is a cable under the sea between us and France. And because that interconnector was out of action and is still out of action, it's meant that we've been cut off from certainly France for electricity coming through those cables. That's created a bit of a short-term shortage in backup supply. So there's been some volatility around that. A bit of a perfect storm, really. The emissions markets also play a part in this mess that we're seeing at the moment. So particularly the carbon markets. So carbon permits allow fossil fuel to be burnt to generate electricity. So typically gas-fired power plant, and they have they obviously emit greenhouse gas emissions as part of burning that gas to generate electric. Now, the greenhouse gas, the European Union emissions trading scheme, and the UK have actually created their own since Brexit called the UK ETS, and it's designed to incentivise and reduce emissions from big gas usage and big greenhouse gas polluters. These permits are traded, but due to an increase in non-renewable electricity generation around, so in the last couple of weeks, it's not been overly windy. All of the other fundamentals have been pushing around gas shortages. It's meant that carbon prices have been pushed through the roof, because it basically meant we were going to have to turn gas, and well, on a couple of particular days, we actually fired up a coal-powered electricity generation station to generate electric to make sure that we could meet our demand with supply. So these carbon prices have been pushed up through demand. At the same time, the supply of these available permits are reducing in line with trying to tackle climate change. So whilst the demand's up, the supply of them is also diminishing over a period of time. So again, worst kind of factors that could occur. Opportunities wise, I've left that blank. Short-term opportunities in the market are very, very limited at the moment. Whilst they have come down over the last couple of weeks compared to where it was, there's a lot of drivers and risks at the moment that are keeping the market buoyant and keeping the prices high. So I don't envy anyone who's got a renewal in the next couple of months, or at least over this winter period. Looking at long-term risks and opportunities in the market, you'll see some common themes here. Appreciate I'm not an energy market mystic Meg, but I can only kind of provide some insight based on the current signals and the drivers in the market. So the way I see the upside risk is that Russian exports, whilst they're remaining limited, it's going to keep supply tight in Europe throughout the winter period as we're coming into the colder season as well. So demand's going to be higher. UK generation can be intermittent in the sense of we've got a lot of renewable wind generation assets. If the wind doesn't blow and we have a lot of high pressure over winter, that's going to take those out, which means we're going to become more reliant on gas to generate electricity. And if gas prices are high because they're under high demand and not a lot of supply, it's going to cost a fortune for electricity and obviously gas, because that's going to increase the demand. The potential opportunities then, I guess, in the longer term would be that there's talk that there's going to be more carbon permits allowed in a short term into the carbon market, freeing up some of those supplies, which should drop the carbon price, which means any fossil fuel generation that occurs in the next 3 to 6 months may not be as a higher premium than it is at the moment in the shortage of those carbon permits. There's been a number of large industrials that are exposed to these 15-year market highs. They've had to reduce their demand. So I mentioned that fertilizer manufacturer in the northeast that's been in the news, meaning that demand has temporarily reduced versus where it would have been pre-COVID last year, let's say, where it would have been typically. So that should help to soften the market. And the markets are also backwardated. So I know that sounds like I've just made the terminology up, but essentially at the moment, the further out you procure, the cheaper the energy is. Now, typically that wouldn't be the case because there's risk premiums further out to cover speculation and risk. But at the moment, because the short-term prices are so horrendous, looking out for, you know, the 12 months starting next October and thereafter, gradually each year on year, they're looking cheaper at the moment. So for anyone that's, I guess, took a big sting in the last few months that's renewed their contracts for only 12 months, there is opportunity right now, if you're proactive, to look forward, not necessarily giving the advice to buy now, but just be able to track that and keep an eye on what's available in the market and whether it's good value based on where you've hedged currently, to try and potentially give you a saving next year versus this year. That's obviously going to be a different piece of advice if you've locked in 2020 and you're sat there nice and pretty on £32 a megawatt for your power. But trying to cater for all events on the call today. So giving you all doom and gloom, The positives are that there's ways in which you can mitigate this negative impact, so ways you can manage this cost getting any worse. There's a number of different options. To try and simplify things, I've broken those into two real options, one being fixed, one being flexible procurement. So I'll try and talk through them. So fixed approach is, at one point in the year or at one point in the next 2 or 3 years, you will go out to renew your contracts. And if you've never really known that flexible was an option, or your business it's really important that you get that budget security, then going out at one particular point in the market is, not too bad an idea. However, timing is everything, because you're only going out once, so you get one throw at the dartboard out of 365 days, for argument's sake. If for whatever reason that throw at the dartboard's on a really bad day, like we're seeing at the moment, or a really bad time, then you're obviously going to fix out at a high price. And if you were contracting a couple of weeks ago, you were fixing out at a 15-year high. So whoever renews your contract next year is going to look like an absolute hero if the market softens versus that contract period. The key benefits of fixed are it's quite simple, i.e. you go out to market, you renew your contract, you lock it away in a cupboard and don't look back. And you're passing the risk on to the supplier. So when you're fixing a contract, you're saying to the supplier, I'll buy my energy at 10p a unit, for argument's sake, for the period of this contract. But if the market moves during that period, Mr. Supplier, you can't pass that on to me. You've got to take all of that risk. And because of that, they're charging you a premium for the benefit of doing so. They're also, fixed contracts are really suitable for static and stable consumption. So if you use a consistent amount and you don't vary too much in your consumption, fixed price contracts can be quite suited to your business. However, the downside of them is that you're paying a hell of a lot in premiums and supplier margins, because, as I said before, it's the only bit that you can negotiate, and the supplier's taking all of the risk. So there's a significant premium added to those. The other downside is that you only get one day of 365 out of a year. Potentially, if you're buying a 12-month contract, that's obviously exacerbated. If you're buying a 2 or 3 year contract, you're taking one day in time over that period of supply. It's extremely risky. Now, a lot of people I speak to that are on fixed price contracts, I'll ask them why they choose fix over flex, and they say because flex is risky. I don't know about you, but I think 1 out of 365 day punt is probably higher risk than spreading your bets, so to speak, and having a bit more of a risk management in place. I appreciate some people don't have enough volume to necessarily access full flexible contracts, but there are some hybrids available in the market now for smaller users, so they can gain that. Another bad point about fixed price contracts is that typically you'll have a take or pay clause in there. Certainly since the pandemic, suppliers are tightening up on those volume tolerances, and typically they're anywhere between 10 and 20% volume tolerance of your agreed consumption. So when you go out to tender, the supplier will look at your last 12 months consumption. They'll apply a tolerance of 10, 20% onto that. If you use more than that or less than that, technically speaking, in the contract, they can come after you for a penalty. Whereas a flexible contract allows you to navigate that in slightly different ways. You can ask for no volume tolerances in your fixed contract, but you will typically pay a premium for the benefit of that, because it makes it really hard for the supplier to forecast the volume that they need to buy for you from the wholesale market. Fixed price contracts are also, it's harder to influence the non-energy costs, so the taxes, the distribution, and the supplier margins, because they're all fixed in. Some of these non-energy costs are dependent on the time or season of use, certainly for the next winter or 2 winters. That's a completely different topic, and probably a seminar in itself about how those non-energy costs are changing over the next couple of years. But certainly for the short term, if you're able to reduce consumption around peak periods on the grid of demand, you can take benefit if you've got those flexible non-energy costs, because you're not using energy at that peak charging point on the grid. Whereas when you get a fixed price contract, the supplier works out your shape of consumption over that winter period that's typically higher in demand, and they'll build in a factor of risk and lock in that cost, wrap it all up into one delivered unit rate. So whether you use energy during the peak times or not, you're paying for the premium of it. Fixed price contracts can also be quite hard to take advantage of future market prices because at the moment, like I said, the market is backwardated. If you went to try and fix that contract now through the typical retail approach, the suppliers would chuck in a massive amount of margin on top of what the wholesale cost is because they're scared it's risk. Whereas a flexible contract would allow you to hedge those seasons or those blocks of energy now with no or very little risk premium included. So scenario on screen is market is very volatile. If your contract comes up for renewal when the market's really high, do you panic and think I better lock it in? Or could you have waited a bit longer and got a better price? Or could you be really lucky and hit the bottom of the market? I guess there's a lot of scenarios as to whether you get a good price with fixed price contracts, and even as energy buying consultants, we'd like to say that a lot of the work we do with our customers to get them a good fixed price is a measured approach. So sussing out the market and figuring out what the drivers are going to be and how that could influence the price. But there is still, and my traders probably won't appreciate this, there's still a degree of luck in getting that right, because you can only base your decision on the information that's available at the time that you make that decision. If you look back on anyone's purchasing decisions over the last 2 or 3 years, it's really easy to poke holes in, oh, well, you could have done it better then, or you could have done this. I guess the best way of measuring is the performance aligned with our strategy or what we intended to achieve. So did we intend to achieve budget certainty, or did we intend to achieve going after the cheapest price in the market? Flexible contracts. So the benefits of a flexible approach to purchasing your energy is it allows you to scrutinize every element of your cost. It provides you with full transparency on your invoices as well. So you get a full itemized invoice, or you can get a full itemized invoice of all of the non-energy costs and your delivered costs, including things like shape fees, risk premiums, supplier margins. They're all split out, which typically means the supplier can't hide any margins in any of these charges. So by achieving transparency in the invoicing, it leaves the supplier no area to add little risk premiums or profit margins, which means typically those premiums fall out of the cost and you get a better price. A fixed price contract is fully delivered, therefore there's no visibility of these individual charges, where a flexible contract is typically on a pass-through basis, which I'll explain a bit later. Supplier management fees are visible on a flex contract, so these will be lower because the supplier is having to disclose their margin to you as the customer. But in the nature of any business, if you're telling your customer what your price is to manage it, it's typically going to be more competitive than if you don't. Flexible contract, the non-commodities are passed through to ensure that you only ever pay the prevailing market rate, so the supplier is not loading it with additional costs. And by agreeing, I guess, a long-term flexible agreement, you're securing that the purchasing mechanism and the contract management fees, but you don't necessarily then have to go out and buy all of your energy on that day. So the day you sign a flex agreement isn't necessarily the day you buy your energy. The trading window, so the time that between you agreeing your supply contract and your next renewal or delivery period, is created, and that allows you to then spread the risk over a period of time. So if you're looking to avoid peaks in the market, that gives you that flexibility to buy before the market increases, or likewise wait until the market's stabilized before you make those purchasing decisions. It also puts you in a position to react quickly. So should you wish to make a trade further into the future, for example, if there's a good value offer 2 years out now and you want to take advantage of that, a flex agreement allows you to do that. I guess on the flip side, a flex contract can also work like a fixed contract. So you don't necessarily have to be an energy trader or employ an energy trader company like us, for example. You can agree a flexible contract, but buy 100% of the exposure on day one. Now, the benefit of doing this is you've still got that flexibility to unravel that purchase, so you could actually sell some energy back to the market of future if you wanted to take that risk. But the key benefit really is that you're not paying all of those risk premiums, supplier premiums, all of the margins that are associated with a typical fixed price contract. You're still getting the same end achievement in the sense of you're getting a fixed price and you know what your cost is for that period, but you're managing to bypass all of those premiums and those risk charges that are associated with a typical fixed price contract, a bit like the Go Compare model. By having a flex contract as well, you can then work with someone like us, for example, to develop a bespoke trading strategy. So you could say, we want to target this particular price in the market and we're going to set our financial budgets against this. As soon as the market gets to that, we can make a purchasing decision on your behalf to trade that energy at that price. Likewise, we can protect you then from any future increases because you've got that flexibility to buy and to sell. You don't get that functionality on a fixed price contract. The risks associated with flexible energy purchasing is that you are sharing some of that risk. So you're not saying to the supplier, I'm going to tell you what price I want to pay, or you tell me what price I'm going to pay over this period, and that can't change regardless of what happens in the market. So if you're on a flex agreement and you haven't hedged your volume, you haven't bought for this period that we're in at the moment, you're probably exposed to some pretty horrendous market prices, like that Northeast fertilizer manufacturer, where they've actually stopped producing for a period of time, waiting for the markets to soften. So with a flex agreement, your energy rates will vary depending on the purchasing decisions that are made. I guess the other downside, which could also be a benefit, is that the non-commodity costs are passed through, so they're flexible. So it can make budget forecasting a bit more complex and a bit more multi-layered, but there's also an inherent benefit of doing that because you're not paying the additional premiums, and it also allows you to demand manage or flex your consumption around periods that are cheaper to consume energy, certainly for the short term anyway. So I think we've got an animated version. Yeah. So in this scenario, here's the market over a period of time. On a fixed contract, for example, if you bought at that point, you've locked out your volume. Whereas on a flexible agreement, you can manage that risk by spreading your purchases over the full trading window before your contract starts. Obviously, on this example that I've given, flex outperforms fixed, but I would, I don't think I can guarantee anything, but I would say I would expect that flexible contracts would always outperform performance-wise a fixed contract. But it's whether some businesses can take that risk of, I don't know what my budget's going to be, or the price could change. I'm sure there might be some questions about this a bit later on. So another way to mitigate your risk is understanding what the market is doing and assessing the information available. There's two key ways of understanding the information, or two key, I guess, information sources. There's fundamental drivers in the market. So these could be weather, supply and demand. These could be political issues that we've already discussed. And then there's the technical side of things. The fundamental can also be emotion and sentiment of people operating in the market. So buyers speculating and thinking, I think the price is going to go up, so I'm going to start buying. A lot of people jump on the bandwagon, and before you know it, there's this falsified demand in the market that's pushed the price up. So that, for no reason, the market could move up because somebody thought something was going to happen and they wanted to take cover. The technical side of things is like technical assessment of what's happening in the market. So it's looking at previous support levels of the market, what the market would need to do to breach those previous support levels. So it takes all of the emotion and the gut feel out of decision making and actually makes it quite a technical piece of analysis. And there's a range of different news outlets or information providers or hubs, like displayed on the right hand side of the screen, which I guess any consultant should be managing. And in some cases, if you're a real big consumer, you've probably got access to these platforms anyway. The next step then is to understand what you're trying to achieve. So what does your procurement strategy need to do? Do you need to just keep the lights on and have a green supply, or actually you're trying to chase the best price in the market? Or the other side of the scales, I guess, is budget certainty. So what's most important to you? And I think understanding that before you then decide how you're going to attack the market is a massive way of making sure that you're doing what you set out to do. If your main driver is budget certainty, as long as you achieve that, there's no point in necessarily cutting yourself up if you could have found a 5% cheaper price in the market by doing something that could have put all of that budget at risk. So it's really important to understand what you're trying to achieve and then aligning how you approach it based on that. Then when you build your contract, as I refer to it, there's different options. So if we look at the top line of the chart, it's your commodity costs, so your wholesale energy price. You can manage this in a number of different ways. So you can buy it just before you need to use it, which is really risky, but you won't pay a lot in the way of risk premiums because no one's trying to guarantee or speculate anything there. The other end of the scale is fixed, so the supplier is taking all of the risk, and because of that, you're paying them a chunky premium to do so. But the benefit of that is that you've got a lot of budget certainty. Somewhere in the middle, I guess the grey area is where a lot of people like to operate. So there's a bit of risk on them, but that can be managed through a proper strategy. But they're taking out a lot of the premiums or the cost of convenience, let's call it, that's applied when you fix your contracts out. Bottom side of the chart is the non-energy costs. So the bits that you can't influence by making a purchasing decision or timing, it's the taxes and levies and the delivery costs. Now you can have them passed through direct to you or pass through. This again means the supplier doesn't touch them. So as soon as the national grid says these are the costs for shipping energy through our part of the grid, the supplier bills you at those prevailing rates. If you choose to fix them, the supplier has to potentially forecast them. And of course, with forecast comes risk and therefore added premiums. You can have a bit of a blended approach as well. So you can fix some of your non-energy costs and leave some of them partially pass through. That can be quite technical. But really what I'm trying to say here is that when you choose your contract, make sure that it's working in your favor. So if you decide that budget certainty is the most important thing for you, don't have a pass-through non-energy contract, because you can't budget for flexible non-energy costs, which arguably are a bigger chunk of your bill than the commodity part is. And I see that so often because an unscrupulous broker has sold them a pass-through contract, selling them that it's maybe better value or a better price, but it's not necessarily going to set out what you tried to achieve. And likewise, don't fully fix your non-energy costs if there's some flexibility in how you consume energy and you're actually available to avoid with relatively low cost or low effort or low impact to avoid using energy in these peak periods of the grid. Otherwise, if you fix them in, you could make all that effort and not get any reward for it. Very briefly, trying to avoid the sales pitch, our approach to managing risk is to understand our customers' first or existing strategy, assess what different products or contract types are available in the market. Some of that will come into, I guess, a credit discussion at the moment, unfortunately, because suppliers are very risk averse now. And depending on what sector you're in or how your books look, they'll take a different appetite or offer a different product to you or a different contract to you. Try and understand and work out what our customers' appetite for risk is. So what happens if the market doubles? Does that completely screw you? Or have you got a bit of flexibility to play the market a bit to try and get a cheaper price, for argument's sake? How important is budget? What does your budget need to be, or what you're trying to achieve from your budget? And then we can try and design a strategy that allow you to capture that number and protect you from any upside of that being broken. And then how does this fit into your wider, it could be your net zero strategy, it could be your CSR initiatives. So do you want to buy green energy from what source? Do you want a power purchase agreement, for argument's sake? Have you got solar panels on the roof, or are you going to put solar panels on the roof, and how's that going to impact your volume in the future? So really capturing all of the information that's important. And then we develop a risk management document that we agree, our customer agrees, and then our job is then to go and execute that risk management strategy. So work within the parameters set by our customer at the outset to then go and execute that contract. Enough waffling from me. Hopefully I've given you enough information on what drives the market. Now I want to play a bit of a game. So I'm going to ask you all to have your phones available again. You're going to have to type in this website in a minute, and it will bring you up onto the Inspired Energy game. It will ask you to put your details in. Don't worry, you're not going to get hounded. We just gate it so that our competitors can't play our games and stuff. But you will have to put your information in there to get through to the game. Before I flash up the link that you need to follow, I just wanted to bust some jargon that you'll see on there. So a bearish driver in the market, a bit like a bear, when it attacks, it pushes down. Therefore, a bearish driver is something that's going to push the market down. And likewise, a bull, when it attacks, it pushes up. I know it sounds stupid, but it's an upward driver on the market. So something that's going to have a pressure pushing the price up. Okay. The trading game. So hopefully, Dawn, you might have to trial this yourself and just let me know that it works. Hopefully technology doesn't completely let me down today. But if you can all put in that website, this should take you to our energy trading game. It's going to give you a few scenarios. It gives you a story where you are an energy buyer for a company that's got a set strategy that they're trying to achieve. You're allowed to make 2 trades, I think it is, and you get 4 different opportunities to buy. So just bear that in mind. If you leave it to the last minute and you don't buy anything, then you're going to be exposed to the market thereafter. And once we've got some results in, if you can scribble down what price you achieved, I'll hopefully chuck those results in the Mentimeter thing, and we can have a little play and see who beat me, or who got the best price. So I'll leave that up on screen, and hopefully it works for everyone. I'll take this opportunity to go and get some water, so I'll be back in a moment. Maybe just drop in the chat a full stop or a comment just to let us know once you've got your result, so we can gauge how people have got on. Don't need to put your result in there yet, just let us know that you've completed it so I can move on to the next bit.
I think I've just learned that I'm a trader. I got an uh-oh. Maybe I shouldn't be put in charge of procurement.
Maybe not. I know the scenario on the game is not perfect world, but the idea is just to get people thinking about how things can push prices up and down, and it starts to get you thinking a bit more like, you know, assessing the information that you've got at the time and how that can drive your decision. Also probably tells you a lot about yourself. If you leave it all to the last minute because you're holding out, sometimes it could come in your favour, and likewise it could also leave you unstuck.
That's really interesting.
Dawn, I'm sorry I can't see the chat because I've got my screen in presenter mode, but do let me know if people have got their results now.
Nobody is actually putting dots or anything in the chat at the moment, so
maybe
I think we can just take an educated guess. And
for those of you that have got your cameras on, I'm trying to see who's looking down at the screen still.
Steve MP has got 59.575p.
Wayne, I don't believe you, mate. Wayne's telling me he got 29.3. You've obviously been playing this a few times.
No, that's the conversion, gas electricity conversion.
All right, sorry. I was going to say that's a stonking achievement. I don't think the price ever got to that in the game. So it wasn't 23.0001, it was 29.307. So 60 pence a therm was 2p. Right, I'm going to quickly flash up the next Mentimeter just to capture the results on there, just out of interest, see how everyone got on. So if you can flick back to that Mentimeter, www.menti.com, the access code's there, and I will flick to that screen in a moment, I hope. Feel free to tell me if it's not working, and then I can start swearing.
All I can see is the first question that you asked earlier.
Right, let me stop presenting on it. You see this one? Trading game, who's the best?
I think what it's telling us is to please wait for the presenter to show the next slide.
Let's just scrap that off. I was trying it as a bit of a go. I can see a few people have put some scores in there. I should have known better than to gamble on a live presentation and use some new technology. Okay, next one's still interactive, but the idea here is now to get you looking at your cost impact and how this could have, the recent market changes could have impacted your future next renewal. So I'm going to need you all to get some kind of straight edge, whether it be a ruler or a piece of paper, a pen and a piece of paper to scribble on. Now I understand that not everyone's typically buying fixed contracts, and this is going to be a bit more accurate for those that are buying fixed contracts. But the idea is to show you how much the market's moved since you last contracted, purchased, locked out your volume, depending on flex or fix. And just compare it to if you bought the next 12 months today, how that cost would impact your business. Because it's likely, as we've said from the market update earlier, that markets are going to stay around these prices, if not go up, over the next winter period. So anyone who's got to buy in the next 6 to 12 months potentially could be seeing levels of where we are now. For anyone wanting a bespoke report, so I've caveated that this might not be 100% accurate, but we are offering these at no cost. So if you do want to get in touch afterwards, I'm sure Dawn will find out who wants to be contacted afterwards. We can certainly provide you a bespoke report in the final poll when Dawn captures that information. So to start things off, get your straight edge, and the idea is it could be a ruler or a piece of paper. I want you to plot on the chart, so hopefully you can see my mouse, when your last contract started or when you last procured or signed your contract. So hopefully there's no smart gits that bought in 2017 and haven't touched it since. So obviously, for exaggeration purposes, I've highlighted that my last contract was at the low of the market, and I got £32.25 a megawatt. This is for power, by the way, electricity. So if you can chart out a line back to the left-hand side of the axis in line with a date or a month when you last renewed or contracted or your contract started, and find out what that starting point is. Then need you to do the same based on today. Well, I'll give you the answer, or yesterday, should I say, because I had to prepare. And today's price for the next 12 months is £114.40. So next is some reasonably simple maths. Hopefully everyone's got their starting point. I'll just leave this on a couple of minutes. Okay. Really simple maths. The green line, today's price, minus your starting point, the red line on my chart. That gives you a cost difference in £1 per megawatt. So £82.15 in the scenario I've given. Obviously trying to over exaggerate things. Then what you need to do is take your cost difference and multiply it by your annual consumption. If it's in kilowatts, you're then going to have to divide it by 1,000 to get it back into pounds per annum. I use the example that I used 1 million kilowatts. So in normal monetary terms, that should be about 150 grand spend, but actually at the moment at 114, it's a bit more because this is only just the wholesale cost. So yeah, this £1 million kilowatt consumption based on the last 5-year average would cost me about 60 grand. But if I bought that at the moment, it would cost me 114 grand just for wholesale cost. Feel free to unmute yourself and tell me if you've done it or you've got any problems or it's not worked or you can't do it because you're flexing, you've hedged out really well. I just thought it was an idea to get everyone engaged and give some people maybe some warning that even if you're in contract for the next 12 months, you may not necessarily be safe from these horrendous price hikes. Give it another couple of minutes. This was a hell of a lot easier when I used to do this in person. Because you could literally walk around people's tables and check the homework. If you don't know your consumption, I'd use an old rule of thumb that whatever your spend is, so say you spent 100 grand on energy, just put down that your consumption was a gigawatt, or 1 million kilowatts. I know it's not 100% accurate, but it gives you, it's an easy sum to do. So per million kilowatts or per £100,000 spend, it's around 1 million kilowatts of consumption. Not in the current market, but it just makes life a bit easier if you don't know the kilowatts off the top of your head. Okay. Hopefully everyone's done it. I was going to use that Mentimeter to do the poll, but I've clearly demonstrated that it's not working properly for me today. But hopefully some people have got an idea of what the next renewal could look like, certainly in the next 3 to 6 or 12 months, or if you're renewing now. And hopefully we've given you some insight today to give you an understanding of what you can do to potentially mitigate that, and what could potentially happen in the future, where the risks are for the short term and what opportunities there are for long term if you're being proactive. So other than answering any questions, which I'm going to come off my screens now, so I can see you all staying quiet. Please let me know if you've got any questions that I've not answered or any jargon that you want me to simplify. And if you all stay quiet, it means I've done a really good job.
Might also be an opportunity where I quite quickly run my poll. It's only 2 questions.
Yeah.
And just while people are thinking, if you want to stop sharing your screen, Dan, that would be
Will do.
good. Okay, and I'll launch that so everybody can have a look. So just basically, Dan is offering a free consultation to maybe give you a bit more detail. And has it been beneficial? I've certainly found it amazing. I didn't realize the whole buying of energy was quite so complex. So, you know.
Yeah, it can be, I guess, made out to look like witchcraft and wizardry, but it is complex. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes that people are, unless they get into the nitty gritty, are shielded by from the energy suppliers. But that's why energy suppliers make so much money. And thankfully, energy suppliers make so much money. That's why people like us exist. We're there to try and police them.
Yeah. Good. I'm going to end that poll now. It looks like everybody is kind of done. Somebody else is just typing in. So very quickly, if anybody does want to answer, that would be really helpful. Okay, so majority of you are saying that it's been beneficial to you. That's good. The ones that are unsure, I'm not sure why you're unsure, and if you want to share that with us, maybe there's some deeper questions you want answering, please do let us know. What we've got in the chat at the moment, yes, people very interesting. Some people are having to leave. Any questions?
I've got a question for Dan.
Oh, good.
Be kind.
Yeah, okay. You explain the fixed and flexible approaches. In the past, we've been approached by brokers or consultants that offer if you like, an energy club, whereby they gather together a number of subscribers. They gather together a number of subscribers and use their combined demand to buy forward on the market. Is that an approach that's still generally available?
Absolutely, yeah. So the the main purpose of those approaches, portfolios, buckets, collectives, baskets, however you want to phrase it, is aggregating smaller users in their own right together to make a larger consumption that then warrants being on a flexible contract. Now, one of the challenges that you will have operating a flexible contract as a small user is, one, you need a trader or someone that can trade, so a consultant, and obviously our fees or other people's fees cost money. And if you can only save 10% of 10 grand energy spend, but it's going to cost you 5 to 10 grand in broker fees, then you're wiping out all of that value. So the idea of these portfolios or collectives or baskets is to allow you to join a predetermined strategy and a collection of customers to get that volume to trade and make a number of trades over a period of time. Still very much available, still very much beneficial for people that are, I would probably say, if you're spending 100 grand and upwards, definitely review your opportunities there to move into that kind of approach rather than just staying on your own fixed contract. If you're spending or using maybe 8 million kilowatts, £1 million-ish or above, I would suggest looking at a flexible contract in your own right, where you can almost write your own T's and C's and determine your own strategy. But yeah, anything from 100 to maybe £500,000 spend, certainly review opportunities in those portfolios. And that the main benefits are you get access to wholesale market, so you can buy flexibly. Some people offer different options, so you can have high risk, low risk, medium risk strategies within those portfolios. The other main benefit is that you'll get a predetermined lower supplier margin. So if you appreciate your business going to market versus 1,000 collectively going to market, that's a more appealing proposition for a supplier to contract with that portfolio than it is a one person. So you get a predetermined lower margin. And you do sometimes get access to better products, or they might offer, REGO contracts, renewable energy generation origin contracts at lower margins, things like that. And you'll also get benefit from the take or pay clauses. So the take or pay clause is where you use more or less than what you agree or you previously used. In a portfolio, that's diluted somewhat because you're part of a larger group. Now, a well-run portfolio, if you breach your tolerance and other people don't, then you won't get charged. If other people in the portfolio breach their tolerance and you don't, you shouldn't get charged. So just make sure you check that when looking at portfolio or basket approaches. Hopefully that's answered your question, Steve.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's a comment also from Dave Standley with regards to they're due to renew electricity in October 22. Not sure if you can see that there, Dan.
I'll just open the chat. Due to renew in October 22. From your information, I expect wait until at least spring 22 when best option at the moment. Do you agree? If you are on a fixed price contract and intend on staying on a fixed price contract, then my personal opinion would be yes, wait for winter to get out of the way and start reviewing. You're still buying a seasonal block of winter and summer next year. So you don't get better prices typically buying in summer rather than winter. It's just the markets are less volatile in summer typically. And if we look at any previous winters, around February, March time, if we've not had a cold winter, typically there's a dip in the market because that risk premium that was built in around September, October in anticipation for it being cold, when it turns out materializes that it's not, those risk premiums dissolve and come out of the market. So people start selling back hedges that they've made, and that creates a surplus of available supply. So yeah, short answer, if you're on fixed, yes, wait. If you are on flexible and you've got the opportunity to maybe put some budget restrictions in place, I'd recommend putting some kind of not a cap as such, but maybe a budget worst case scenario to say, don't let it get over 60, 70, 80 pound a megawatt. And if it does, then we've got to procure. But at the moment, the market's pretty horrendous. So yeah, I wouldn't want to be hedging unless you had to right now. Again, a lot of that will come down to your appetite for risk and what's important. Hopefully I've answered that. I think I went round the houses there. No problem, Dave, thanks.
Any more for any more? If not, I guess it's just for me to conclude today's session. Dan, as usual, you've been outstanding. The information you've shared with the audience is very, very beneficial, I would imagine. So thanks to you and Inspired Energy for your expertise and your time in putting this together to help members understand what's going on. I'll be having a discussion with Dan about the information that we're sending out today. Those of you who want contacting, I'll be making those introductions. Those of you go away, think about it and change your mind and want further information, please do contact us. We'd be very, very happy to connect you with Dan at any time. So that's it from me. If there's nothing else from anybody else, I'm happy to end the session here.
Thanks for being nice guests and not asking me too challenging questions. And I'm sure I'll see you on another webinar soon.
Will the recording of
Thanks,
the
Dan.
webinar be available to the participants?
I think so, yeah. Dawn?
Yeah. I'm just going to stop the recording now.
I've got a few people I would like to see this as well.